Hey everybody, welcome back to our neck of the woods and the start of Aaron's Miata build. So first thing first, we have our first upgrade that we have to bolt on. All right, just kidding. It's not really a first performance upgrade. It's just her license plate. But that does bring up an interesting topic. Where you guys live, what do you guys pay for plates and stuff, and what do you have to do? I know places like California are probably the most horrific things ever to get license plates and stuff and to register vehicles. But here in the state of Ohio, I guess it's not too bad. The only thing that I absolutely hate and I absolutely cannot stand is here we have to pay vehicle sales tax even on a used car. And I just think that's the absolute most thievery, bullcrap, waste of money that you can think of, because the vehicle has already paid sales tax when it was brand new. So, I mean, I know everyone hates tax in America, but it's just insane that you pay for something. You're already getting taxed on it when you buy it new. You're paying it when you buy it used. When you work at a job, you know, you're getting taxed on your income. You're paying tax for your city and your state. And then on your property tax, you're paying for your city and state, or your city and county again. Aaron and I don't have kids, so we're paying taxes for schooling and police and fire, which obviously I don't mind that. But again, it's almost like you're paying for it twice, because your property tax is paying for your police and fire and your roads, but then you're also paying it within your paycheck. And it's just taxes on taxes on taxes on taxes. So where you guys live, how bad are your taxes? Here in the state of Ohio, you can pretty much lie on your title and say you paid $1 for a car and pay taxes on $1. If you're buying it from a dealership, you obviously have to pay full taxes on what the dealership said you were buying the car for. But there are some states in America where there is no vehicle sales tax. And that's why a lot of like supercar owners, for example, they will say that their vehicle is registered in one of those states, so they get away with it. Because why does a super rich person want to pay sales tax on like a $500,000 car if they don't have to? But I guess you can get in trouble for that, and there are some states that try and crack down on that and try and make you pay. But I just think it's absolute bullcrap that you have to pay, at least on a vehicle. I understand on some other things, like going to the store and paying sales tax, you know, on like new furniture or something, etc. But I just think it's absolutely crazy to have to pay for vehicles. But I guess in the state of Ohio, it's not as bad as it could be, because I think there are some states out there where I think you have to pay sales tax on the vehicle every single year. So while our vehicle registration is only about $45 a year for a plate, I think there's some states out there that have to pay basically on like the value of the car. So even if you buy a brand new car or truck for like say $50,000 and you pay taxes on it at a dealership, I think the next year or maybe in a few years, etc., if that truck's still worth like $40,000, just to re-register your plate, I think you have to pay taxes on whatever the value is. Even if it's an absolute broke, destroyed, disgusting piece of crap that's only worth $1,000, I think you still have to pay taxes on it as if it were the retail value. And if you don't have to do that every year, I think you have to do it when you go and buy a used car. They will look up the value of the car no matter how much a piece of crap it is, and that's what you're paying your taxes on. Let me know if there's anyone in the states like that that's actually true. All right, so as promised in this video, the first thing that we're gonna be doing to this car is changing out all of the fluids. But as funny as it is, as we just put the expansion tank on the 1LE, we actually basically have to do the exact same thing to this car now. And the reason why that is this car is called an NC. So every generation has its own like set of letters. So the 2006 to the 2015 is called the NC. So I think I'm just gonna refer it from that from now on. So the NC model, we have a problem with them. They're the only Mazda that apparently uses the factory coolant overflow tank. They use that as a pressurized system for the entire coolant system. Well, what ends up happening, and I didn't plan on doing this, I just happened to fall across it on the forums, that seems to be a very common problem on these, is that because this is plastic right here, this can basically crack and you lose all of your coolant. You'll send the car basically into limp mode, your oil light will go ballistic, and basically we can't have that. I can't drive this thing up to the furthest emergency department that I work, that's about 150 miles round trip, or even have Aaron drive this a couple miles to work and have this thing basically break down on the side of the road. There's no rhyme or reason of when this neck right here where the filler cap is, there's no rhyme or reason when it actually breaks and goes bad. On the forums, people have reported as low as 20,000 miles and some have reported up over 100,000 miles. So it's not if this tank is going to break, it's when it's going to break. So the first actual real mod that we have to do to this thing is exactly what we just did to the 1LE. And we've got a metal tank coming. I can't remember if I bought a new cap or not, because these obviously, they release under a certain amount of pressure. I can't remember if I bought that or not, but we got to unbolt this guy. We got to put a new one on. And since we're going to be doing the coolant system anyway, we're going to be going ahead and putting on a new thermostat. And then again, I've got enough distilled water that we're going to put water wetter in it and put the entire system full of regular distilled water and water wetter. So there'll be no coolant in this car, so we can get the temperatures down as low as possible. And the tracks will love us a lot more because we don't have like a slippery coolant substance if anything goes wrong that will be getting coolant all over the racetrack. So I'm going to wait for Erin to get home. I have to tell her about that tank. We're gonna hopefully sit down at the computer and look over some car parts together and see what other mods we actually want to do. And then we'll tell you what she has picked. And then we will get to changing all of the fluids and everything. And we'll figure out when this guy's gonna show up and we'll go ahead and get that installed. So I will be back later today and we'll get started. All right, everybody, welcome back. We have finally accumulated all of our parts that we're gonna go ahead and replace all the fluid on this thing. We're gonna be putting in some good old oil. We're gonna be getting rid of the normal coolant and putting in distilled water. And then for that faulty pressurized OEM tank, we're gonna go ahead and swap it out with this metal one. So if you're wondering, Scott, that is a whole lot of Redline. You are correct. I do like Redline products. I think that they're the best in my opinion. You guys obviously can go ahead and use what you want. But I got hooked on Redline a few years ago because they're the only ones that had a few things that like hit all the things that I wanted. And that was number one. Redline is only one of 2 oils that I know of that basically start with the best oil that you can start with. And that is an ester based, or in this case, a polyol ester base. Not polyester, but polyol ester base. And that is like the best base stock that you can get. And then also Motul uses it too. So if you look at this list right here, you can see what I'm talking about. You've got your Redline and Motul. You've got below that, you've got your Royal Purple AMS oil. Below that, you've got your Mobile One. Below that, you've got Valvoline. And then below that, you've got like your conventional oils. So in my opinion, you might as well start with the best oil. And I think the best oil stock has to do with it doesn't like start to shear off as more. So on the ZL1, for example, when you're above like that 260 degree Fahrenheit, the better oil that you have means that when it's above that temperature, it doesn't start to shear off and no longer become slippery. You want to have an oil that's going to go further and last longer. So you're going to want a more high performance type of oil and a more expensive oil, which again would be the Redline and the Motul. The other thing that convinced me to go with Redline is I actually did some oil analyses and sending them off to Blackstone Laboratory. And one of the things that I liked was your anti-wear properties need to be high, obviously. You don't want your engine to break down. You don't want things to go wrong. If you do happen to run out of oil, like a guy when we were at Nelson's Ledges, he went off track, had an oil line rip off of his car. I'm sure he immediately shut it down, but if he didn't, you want your anti-wear properties to be left behind to help coat everything and give you a little bit more protection for a little bit longer. Not to mention when you're having cars sit for a long period of time, you want those anti-wear properties to stick around. So that way when you go to start it up next spring, everything is still kind of coated. And your anti-wear properties are your zinc, your phosphorus, and your molybdenum. So you want those to be high, and moly, in my opinion, is probably the best, which is why there's companies out there who make oil, and they also make pure bottles of moly to send, and that would be from a company basically like Liquid Moly. They're getting that name and they're selling you that bottle of an additive because, again, it's basically pure moly. Moly is like the best and newest anti-wear that they didn't have years ago, where they were just using zinc and phosphorus. So in my analysis, I had Mobile One tested one time, and the moly only came back at like 70, and the Redline came back at 700. So 10 times the amount of moly in Redline. So I don't think, why would you want to purchase Mobile One and then have to spend more money and purchase a bottle of moly just to add it in, when you can just go buy Redline by itself and use that for your engine oil and not have to worry about any extra products that you're adding into it. But let me know what you guys think. What down below, what do you think is the best? I know every YouTuber out there is either sponsored by Valvoline or AMSOIL, but in my opinion, again, these two companies have everyone else beat. Now, again, the whole purpose of this video is to go ahead and replace out that faulty factory plastic coolant reserve kind of catch can. We went with the Moroso one, and we did get a new cap on it from CFF Radiators. So we're gonna go ahead and be installing that. We did get a new thermostat just because we're gonna be in there and doing stuff with the coolant, especially draining it for the racetrack and adding the water wetter. And we did go ahead and pick up a brand new OEM thermostat because the aftermarket ones, I just didn't like the way they looked. A lot of this stuff in here is basically plastic. So I figured this stainless steel, or at least this coated steel here, was a lot better, and it's gonna be a lot stronger and last better than the cheap like auto part stores ones, where again, those reinforcement sides were made of plastic. So let's go ahead and get this thing up in the air. Let's start with the rear diff oil first, because that's going to be the quickest and easiest. And then we'll just kind of go ahead and move forward. All right, so first thing first, again, let's go ahead and do the rear differential. Just make sure that you always loosen the fill plug first before you dump it all out. And then, of course, you can't get the oil back in, but that's not really a problem here because we can pretty much take care of it ourselves. We don't have to drive this thing to a mechanic shop. We would basically just unbolt the differential, take that thing out, heat it up, etc. But always make sure you loosen the fill up first. Alrighty, so absolutely nothing came out. So I don't know if that is properly filled correctly, because you should see some little bit amount leak out, and this car actually isn't perfectly level. It's actually facing just ever so slightly downhill. So the fact that absolutely nothing is coming out, we're probably due for a change anyway. Now, I'm surprised Redline is recommending the oil that they are recommending, because we do not have a limited slip differential, and they want me to be using a GL5 with friction modifiers in it. And I don't see the purpose of the friction modifiers when we don't have an LSD, but I don't think adding friction modifiers is going to hurt anything. But I just thought that was weird that they recommended that type of oil. Oh yeah, this thing definitely needed replaced. Look how much metal is connected to this thing, to this magnetic drain plug. I don't think this was done 10,000 miles ago. This has probably never been changed in 17 years or 31,000 miles. Now, I do have an extra bottle of this 7590 rear diff. Again, it's a 7590 GL5 with friction modifiers in it. Not that this needs it, but I've got an extra bottle of this left over from the Camaro. So I am gonna dump this in because this has been open for over a year now. And if it's absorbed water, etc., I don't want this in here or in the Camaro. So just to get rid of this, I'm gonna throw this up in there, get the car up off of the ground, spin the rear tires a little bit, kind of get this coated all over everything, and then I'm gonna dump it out again and basically flush out the differential just because I wanna waste this. And then it takes 0.6 quarts to go back in there. Oh yeah, that's definitely a hell of a lot cleaner. So spinning that and getting it around everything. Again, like we're basically just doing a flush into the system. Now when we go to put stuff in here, it'll be like basically 100% pure. And FYI, filling these things back up and the transmission, you're simply just putting in the drain plug back in, and then you're filling it up with a transfer pump until the oil starts to drip back out. When it drips back out just a little bit and all the way down, you know that you're 100% done and it's full to the top. All right, diff fluid is done, and it is always a wise idea. Get some brake cleaner, spray it all over that, get all the oil residue off. That way you know if you've got a leak, you know that you have a leak, because right now it is bone dry. But next, let's go to the transmission. Looks pretty easy. Looks like we've got a drain bolt right there, and right up above we've got a fill bolt, so the exact same procedure. Loosen the top one first, then take off the bottom. This thing is supposed to take 3 quarts, and Redline has recommended the MT-90, so it's basically just a 75-90. The same as the rear diff, except this is a GL4. And of course, there's no friction modifiers in it because it doesn't have any like clutch packs or plates to deal with. I think I am gonna remove this bracket though, so I can get to the fill plug a little bit easier. And holy crap, does this suck to change out the engine oil with the filter up in there with all of this plate right here. All of that oil is gonna come right down on top of this plate and make this thing an absolute nightmare to clean up. That is, unless we do kind of the same thing, and that is we unbolt this plate here, and it looks like we can unbolt this back plate. The only thing you have to worry about when you're undoing some cross braces and stuff, our Porsche Cayman S, for example, had a rear cross brace, and if you remove that, you screwed up the alignment. I don't think these braces have anything to do with an alignment being in the middle of the car. But don't just go ahead and remove braces thinking that you're going to be good to go, because you could screw something up. But these ones look generally easy to remove, and they're not going to hurt anything. But just keep that in mind, especially any of you guys that have a Porsche. That bracket or that brace did not go on easily, and I thought I screwed something up. But again, that's because the chassis twisted and moved, and when I was able to get it back in, all of the alignment would have been off. So we're gonna get this thing aligned anyway for the track for Erins, so I'm not worried about that, but just keep that in mind. That's interesting that that was pressurized, but it is good to see that this was properly filled because it is draining back out. So that oil actually looks pretty good, but once again, look at all those metal shavings around the magnetic drain plug. So it is probably wise to go ahead and change this out every once in a while until all of these shavings basically go away. All right, this is the part that sucks. Anyone who got a better transfer pump than just sitting here and doing this 1,000 times manually? Oh, and FYI, the GL5 is more amber colored, and this manual transmission fluid is more like pink colored. So I guess if you can't read, you won't screw it up and put the wrong one in the wrong spot. All right, guys, 2 down, 3 to go. If you're keeping track at home, Redline said 0.6 in the rear. I actually used about 98% in the rear of a full quart, so that was a little off. And the transmission, I still have almost a full bottle left of number 3. So to put fluid back in the transmission, it was probably only like 2.2 quarts. So again, a little bit off, but as long as you buy 1 for the rear and 3 for the transmission, you should be good to go. All right, engine oil is next. If you've seen one, you've seen 1,000. I did go ahead and empty out my pail here in case we definitely don't want this to overflow. But Redline says this holds 5 quarts, so let's see how accurate they are on that. And I did find a Valvoline sticker on the inside of the car, and this oil actually needed changed in 500 miles, so we're pretty much right on time to do it. Although I'm not sure how long Valvoline recommends, but it's a decent amber color and it looks completely clean. So I bet Valvoline says every like 3,000 miles, so they make more money off of you. All right, so the NC Miata uses 5W20. So that's the type of red line that we're gonna be putting in here. If you care, I am a Purolator or oil filter guy. I saw one time someone took all the major brands apart, and a lot of them have like cardboard inside of them, like separating one spot from another. And the Purolator line uses all metal construction. So that pretty much sold me on that brand. And they make 3 different ones. They make a regular, the One, and they make a Boss. And they basically just get higher and higher on their mileage. I don't think you particularly need the Boss because I don't think anyone really runs 15,000 miles on engine oil. I don't think it's a good idea anyway. Not to mention if it is for 15,000 miles, it may have too much filtration, and you don't really want that on a track car. So I just kind of go with the middle of the road, which is the One. And since this oil filter installs up this way, I do always go ahead and pre-fill my oil filters, so that way the system doesn't run dry when you go to turn it on for the first time. And as long as you put some oil around the ring here to give it some sealant and so it doesn't stick or anything, and it provides good suction, you are good to go. All right, time for the part of the video that you guys have all been waiting on. We need to drain the coolant and install our new can up front, but I cannot figure out how to get this lower belly pan off. You would think this thing just unbolts, but Mazda decided to rivet it here, 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 and here, and the belly pan can't come off because again, it's riveted on. I don't know why they couldn't just use the bolts and everything that I've already taken off and these like little plastic pop rivety things, but I can see the radiator up in there, but I have not found any drain plug that is readily accessible yet. So it's gonna take me a minute to figure out how to either get more of this off, or you gotta take off the entire inner fender wells to get to more bolts up in here that hold these side pieces on that run all the way up into the freaking engine bay. That's a really stupid design, but we gotta get this coolant drained out of this radiator somehow. All right, Mazda, sorry I feel bad. You don't have to remove the under tray. Right here on the driver's side in this hole right here, there is a plastic Phillips head screw that you normally see on all radiators. I just thought it was back here on the back of this radiator because it's crazy that the radiator is all the way back here and the front of the car is all the way up here. This radiator is not sitting forward, it's sitting at a complete sharp angle like this. And I was looking towards the back of the radiator where it would empty out, but it's a little bit more front end on this upper corner over here. And again, you just remove that Phillips head and it should all drain out. So pretty easy. I just had to look for a little bit longer. All right, now for the fun part, getting all this out. I did go ahead and take the cap off up top so this comes out easy. Ugh, I got it in my mouth and all over my arms. It does taste sweet though. I can see why animals like it. And I got one drop in my freaking eye. Wear safety glasses, people. But now I gotta fish the drain plug back out of there, put it back in, and then we can go ahead and remove our thermostat, remove the overflow tank or the pressurized tank, get all that installed, fill this thing up with oil, and then all we have to do is the brake fluid, and then we will be done. Oh, and when that drain plug fell in, there is a rubber seal. Don't forget that, and that obviously is what keeps that thing from not leaking. But it looks like it's in mint condition, so we're just gonna go ahead and screw this back in and reuse it. All right, time for the expansion tank install. Looks pretty easy. There's 3 hoses on top, 1 on the bottom, and then it looks like there are 3 10mm bolts holding this thing on. So it should be pretty simple. There is some fluid still down in the bottom, so when I take off the bottom hose, we're probably gonna have some dump out, but again, taking this thing on and off looks like it should be no big deal at all. Now these have been on for 17 years, so you don't want to rip them. You just want to barely grab them and help give them a little bit of a twist off the plastic. And then they should pop right off. right, easy peasy. That might be the easiest installed part I've ever done in my life. Wait, I spoke too soon. It's a little tight getting this back on. Yeah, I spoke too soon. The barb fitting on this is basically bigger than this clamp. I gotta figure out how I can slide this up and over without chewing that hose up. Holy crap, got it. Ugh. I know why everyone curses those things and say they're the absolute worst clamping style you can use, but as I mentioned in my other video, when we basically put one of these on the Camaro, they are the best style clamp because they constantly are holding tension. When these hoses get old and they flex and expand and contract, those clamps are always putting a lot of tension or a little tension, like back and forth on them. A worm clamp, you can never get them tight enough. All right, done and done. I gotta say, I don't like it as much as the Cords performance that we put on the 1LE. This is like a shiny black, and there's even imperfections in the powder coat that they did. So they did not paint this thing very well, and it does not match everything in the car. They definitely should have used more of that wrinkled black finish to get this thing to match, but I guess it is what it is. I'm not really an engine guy, so I don't really care all that much. But it does look like we need to go ahead and replace the seal on the power steering, because that is clearly leaking. You either need a whole new cap or at least the rubber seal that's on the inside of there. But now we need to take the entire intake off, and way back down in there is the new thermostat. So I've heard this thing is not the easiest to get to. There is only 3 bolts, but you can't see one. One of them you can, and one of them is just really hard to get to like get the bolt back in. Some people use like a almost like a caulking or something on the bolt so it stays inside of your socket as you're feeding it back in there, so the bolt doesn't basically fall out. So this guy is going to be a little bit more tricky, but I got to get all this crap off first, and then we'll see how hard it is to actually get to those 3 bolts and actually pull them. All right, air box pops right out. There's 2 10mm right here, and just loosen the clamp back here and unplug the mass airflow sensor and pop out the plastic rivet. But that's interesting that they put the ECU in the engine bay right underneath of the air box. How does that thing not get wet or get destroyed? That's really weird. As for the air box, looks like the filter relatively new. Probably not more than 10,000 miles when that guy said that he had everything changed out on the car. But we'll probably go ahead and replace this too. I don't think we're gonna get a cold air intake system for it. I don't think it's worth the money to gain like 1 horsepower. But I might go ahead and replace that filter with a K&N aftermarket filter just to get a little bit more airflow in there. But I guess now we have to take off the entire throttle body assembly and the rest of the intake hose. And then it looks like we're going to be coming in this way on top of the main coolant hose here that you can see going in that way. And that's where our thermostat goes, inside of that hose. And there's 2 hoses on there. So a little bit more digging around and a little bit more unbolting to go. All right, so I just got the throttle body off the intake manifold, but I'm going to do a little trick here. All throttle bodies have coolant that runs through them. They do that because in the middle of winter, they don't want your throttle body to like ice up and seize. But I have disconnected the coolant lines off of every throttle body car that I've ever had, except for the Camaro, obviously, and the AMG. But the other cars, I've always done it because now you're removing a 220-degree heat source away from your intake. Instead of this thing getting super, super hot and having coolant run through there, simply undo the 2 coolant hoses and find a way to basically reroute them. So it looks like, I'll have to show you back in there, but it looks like the hose that was on the bottom can be looped over to where the hose coming from the top is. So that hose is gonna get repurposed. As it was sitting like this, we're gonna bring it up over and down and connect into it so it still completes a circle as it once was. It's just no longer to be going through the throttle body. Does it do anything for performance? Probably not. But technically speaking, you are keeping the throttle body slightly colder. But I personally have never had a problem in any winter months driving a car all year long with having the coolant lines removed from the throttle body. I never had a freeze up. The engine bay gets hot enough once you start to drive. The throttle body is going to get above 32 degrees Fahrenheit for it not to freeze up or do anything weird. But I've just personally have never had a problem. So do it at your own risk. If you live in a winter state and you're going to drive your car throughout the winter, this car is going to be summer only, hence why we're putting water back in the radiator system. But yeah, just a cool little feature to try and keep heat away. Get rid of your coolant lines and reroute them so they're still in a circle. And that way you keep your throttle body just a little bit colder. All right, success. We were able to get the factory one off. And yeah, even the factory one uses plastic. So the part was definitely superseded in later years. But the internet did lie. You can look down in there from this direction and you can see all of the bolts. Getting them back in is going to be another story. And getting off the top hose was very hard. I actually had to pull this thing out and away before I could get the top hose off because it was so crushed around the plastic for obviously so many years. But it is doable. You can see all 3 bolt locations. It's just not the easiest. And getting these back in, they're probably gonna fall out of the socket. So this is gonna be a little bit tricky, but it is doable. I think with both the bottom and the top hose off, I think it is possible that you may be able to get your finger in there and start the bolt at least, and then start to thread it in slightly with the hoses out of the way. But like I said, I am glad to get a brand new one with a better fully metallic all the way up and around, instead of this plastic one that looks like it just sits in like little groove channels. And if those plastic pieces break under stress of racing or heat of racing, then you're gonna be in trouble. Especially if that gets sucked down inside of your coolant system somewhere and goes through your water pump and is destroyed. So I do like the brand new one. So let's see if I can get these guys back in there, get them started at least. And then we got to figure out how we're going to pressurize a system that uses pressure to have the system where it doesn't have like an overflow. That's going to be interesting. But once we get this guy back on and bolt it all up, I'll let you guys know how we're going to do that. All right, everybody, I got it. It was not as bad as the internet made it out to be. I could see every single bolt with a light on my head. You can totally get away with a 1/4 inch, 8mm socket to get back down in there. And with both of the hoses off, you can get them back in and tighten them up, absolutely no problem. The only thing that I will say, I can't get the hoses on the throttle bodies to route to each other's locations. So luckily I have this brass barb fitting that was just laying around. So I'm just gonna basically connect the 2 hoses together and bypass the throttle body. Can't believe I had that laying around brand new in the package, but it's the perfect size and it fits right as it should be. So throttle body goes back on, intake goes back on. We're gonna go ahead and fill everything up with coolant. And you're definitely gonna wanna get one of these things off of Amazon too. It's used in exactly these situations. So you basically can pick your cap and everything that you want. You fill this guy up with fluid and it comes with a stopper. So when you're all done and this thing's still full of fluid, you put the stopper in and you can take this thing out of the car. And again, you're kind of making your own connectors, elbows, the caps that fit around your radiator or fit around this pressure tank here. You just find the right one that fits. But this thing is an absolute lifesaver. You gotta pick one of these up. All right guys, I think we're ready to rock and roll and get this thing filled back up. I think the way this works is, obviously you gotta find one that matches, and it looks like it's gonna be the green one, hopefully. Then this green piece with the rubber seal goes down in there, and that will form an airtight seal against that. And then hopefully the green just fits on like a factory piece would. Although this thing is very, very tight. This thing is not made very well. Even getting the new cap on, you have to push down so hard and get this thing to twist that it's basically almost impossible. And now with this rubber piece not crushing that much, makes it even more impossible. All right, I got it to work. I just cut it basically in half. So hopefully that'll fit now. These kind of all just fit tight together. There's your plug, etc. So I guess the only thing that we can try and do is fill this thing up with water. I do have to check the oil still. But the water wetter here says 1 ounce or 3 to 4 caps per quart or an entire bottle for your cooling system. Less than 50% antifreeze provides an improvement in temperature, but at least 15% should help with street driving. So there probably is a good 5 to 10% maybe still in here because it's all within the block and everything, and anything that's in the bottom of the radiator or throughout the line still. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add this full bottle first. And since that hose is on the bottom, it is probably dropping down in somewhere in the system, but this is gonna take a while. So I'm just gonna keep putting distilled water in here. We're gonna fire it up. And then I don't know if this needs pressurized or not, but we're probably gonna have to get down in here with our hand and just keep burping the system. And we gotta obviously wait until that thermostat opens up and then it starts sucking it all throughout. So hopefully this fills kind of like a factory car would, because usually you fill up from the radiator and the radiator is pressurized. This, just like the ZR1 though, just doesn't have an overflow tank like the supercharger system does on that car, which it has now. But hopefully the fill process on this is no different than any other car. Burping this hose is gonna suck. There's a freaking pulley and a belt right where my hand is squeezing. All right, that's probably as full as I can get it. Let's fire her up. Actually, let's check the oil first, make sure we're topped off, and then we just have to wait basically for the thermostat to open up and to suck all this fluid down through. I forgot, make sure you turn the heater on also full blast, so all the hot air is going through there, and all of the coolant is also going to circulate through the heater core. There's another amount of coolant then that's still going to be in the system, everything that was in that heater core. So we probably do have 10 to 15% coolant in here, plus the water wetter. So I think we're more than good that nothing's gonna happen to the cooling system. All right, thermostat just opened up because here come the bubbles. That's probably gonna suck all of that down. And if actually enough of it mixes, we might see some green come back up through here or some pink from the water wetter. Well, something just happened. I was revving it up and this thing almost overflowed. I ran out here to put the plug in and then it sucked it all back down again. Still waiting on the car to start blowing hot air. I think the thermostat's definitely opened up at this time, but might have some air trapped somewhere. All right, I think we gotta go for a test drive and I'll report back. You can see the green coolant has finally mixed in, so there is a decent amount still mixed into the system, so we're not 100% water, and I'm not worried about that at all. These two coolant hoses right here are absolutely blistering hot, but the big hose down here is still pretty cold, and we're still blowing cold air. I just read someone on the forum say that it took his a while to go down the street until he finally got hot air. But from the temperature of these hoses, I think we're fine. And on the dashboard, we're reading right where we should be. So we're not gonna overheat. And it looks like we put in about 1 gallon and I don't know, 3/4. And the system holds about 2 gallons. So we may be a little short, but the water wetter kind of took up for that. And then again, plus whatever still was remaining in the system probably is that full 2 gallons, which I think this thing has. So stopper's in, let's take this thing apart. Probably gonna leak some fluid out around here. We'll put the cap on and fingers crossed it starts blowing hot air when we're out on the street. All right, everybody, that is a success. Just like the guy on the forum said, by the time you get to the end of the block, it's already starting to blow hot. So I don't know what it is about the actual driving that makes it do that, but the tank is extremely hot, cap's extremely hot. Hopefully this cap works better than factory. It says it lets go at 20 pounds, while the factory says it lets go at 16 pounds. So not exactly sure if that means anything, but oil's good, tranny's good. This might be the best shifting car stick shift that I have ever had. It is the absolute tiniest little gear shifts ever. I don't have to even put a short throw shifter in this thing to get that feeling out of it. This thing is just freaking awesome. That's probably why Christian Koenig Von Koenig said, the owner of Koenig said, like the fastest cars in the world and probably some of the most innovative cars in the world. He still drives a Miata every single day. He actually had one. I think it was probably a few years older than this. He had it, sold it, bought the exact same car back, and is still driving it to this day, even though he's got like $1 million plus supercars that he could pick from. So that goes to show you how fun these little things can be. But right now I'm gonna get this thing up in the air. I'm gonna change out the brakes that you guys have seen me do before. I gotta get my 4 Uncles bleeder here. It makes bleeding so easy. You're just sucking everything out of the calipers like that when it's hooked up to an air compressor. And then I'm sure Erin will be home. We'll probably go and get something to eat, and I will let her have a first drive and get her impressions. And if you guys have seen in this video by chance, we did go ahead and purchase her very first item, and that is some lowering springs from H&R. I don't know if the spring rate is exactly that much better than factory to like stiffen this thing up so as we're turning, there's not so much body roll, but we are gonna get rid of this absolutely insane fender gap here because those lower like 1.4 in the front and like 1.3 in the rear. And they will break in over time and get even a little bit lower. But that should help with lowering the center of gravity. It might help a little bit with body roll if they're a stronger spring rate. I don't think H&R lists them, or Miata doesn't list them, or Mazda doesn't list them, so I don't know an apples to apples comparison. But we do have to get some shocks for these guys. No, Erin's not gonna keep this car forever and race it, so I'm not spending like $2,000 or $3,000 on coilovers. The lowering springs that again, hopefully are just stiffer, with some approved lowering ride height Bilstein shocks will probably be more than enough to get this thing to handle, along with some sway bars and maybe some reinforcement chassis stiffening and stuff and bracing. But these guys here, along with the shocks, once I go ahead and buy them, they're definitely gonna be her first performance mod is what we decided on. And then I think we're gonna do some wheels and tires. But I'm gonna change out the brakes. I'm gonna wait for her to get home, and then we're gonna see how she thinks this thing rides and handles. All right, everybody, wrapping it up here. Good first day. Obviously, Erin didn't want to be on camera, and I wouldn't want to either, the first time driving stick shift. But we went down to Granville, my most favorite little town, got dinner, ice cream, etc. And then we went up the hill to Denison University. If you've never seen Denison, it's crazy. I think I like it so much because everything looks kind of like old, like colonial times. And it's just a massive university. It reminds me of like Harvard, or what you would think Harvard would look like. Just crazy like ivory towers up on these hills. And I took her up there because everything is just insanely hilly. I mean, I'm talking like steep, steep hills. So she hasn't mastered obviously yet, able to like pull the e-brake up and roll off the clutch and on the throttle like you normally would if you're on too steep of a hill, and then let the parking brake down as you're going. So I manually did that for her, so she could focus on just the clutching and the braking. I think she only stalled once or twice maybe total, but like I said, she's driven a race bike before. She's driven some stick shifts of mine before. Just been a long time since she's had practice, but like I said, did not want to be on film, and I don't blame her at all because it's already embarrassing or nerve-wracking to focus on everything and then have a camera in your face. But she was able to do it, and I made her drive us home. So she's got to drive this thing to work. She's got to go out with her friend Natalie and get some other experience. So like teacher 1, teacher 2, teacher 3. That way you learn a little bit of everything from everybody. So if I forgot something, maybe somebody else will pick up on it. But we definitely have to get her to drive it to work a lot and get tons of experience before she goes out in her first autocross event. So don't know when that will be, but it will be hopefully maybe this year. But I'm wrapping it up here, guys. The next video you see with the Miata will probably be the install of the lowering springs and the shocks. Maybe then we'll talk about wheels and tires. And then as for car related video, we'll probably take out the 1LE to another track event this year, or be putting on that front mount oil cooler so we can get those temps way down. But until next time, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Encourage Erin just to keep on trucking, and we'll see you guys next time. Till then, take care.